guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to be doing an eye study in watercolor. For this project I am working in my Strathmore watercolor sketchbook softcover, and I will be using my Daniel Smith dot cards along with my Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor set of 12 pans. I also have a few watercolor brushes. The one that I'm most using is the Priceton number 8 round. So as you saw, I just sketched out my eye. And really quick before we jump in, I want to show you my reference photo, which I had pulled into Procreate, and I used the eyedropper tool to pull out some of the colors just so I could get a general idea of what I was going to need to mix and look for. So while I am doing this watercolor study of an eye in my sketchbook, I thought we could have a little art and chat conversation about art studies. I never really knew art studies were a thing up until a couple years ago, and I never really put it into practice until a couple months ago, to be completely honest. I always kind of thought it was just kind of like a little exercise that you could skip. And the more that I do them, the more that I'm realizing how important they are. And it's really been kind of enlightening. Not only are they good for breaking down a bigger subject into smaller pieces and trying to really focus on what that piece of that subject looks like, it also kind of works like a puzzle for that bigger subject. And once you do all the smaller studies of the bigger subject that you're trying to do or get good at, the easier the subject becomes to draw, because you've done individual studies of each piece of, let's say, a tiger. You did the eye, you did the paw, you did the ear, you did the nose, you did a fur study, and then suddenly when you go to actually paint this awesome picture of a tiger, you have a much better understanding of the anatomy of the animal, and you also have an understanding of how the fur works, what the eye really looks like, and all of that. And all of that suddenly makes it a lot easier to tackle that big subject. And that's really applying to what I'm doing right now, is kind of like mentally preparing for portraits. But not only does it help with the subject, I also feel like it helps with a new medium. So as of lately, every time I'm trying a new medium, like digital art, for example, I just did a wolf eye study in Procreate just to kind of really get to know the brushes and get to use everything and practice the anatomy and all of that, because the wolves are going to be a big part of this new project as well. So I really need to focus on all of these little pieces to make sure that the final piece of the whole project really starts to look really nice and cohesive, and it all fits together, and I know how everything is supposed to look. Another thing that is really great about studies that I'm just now realizing is that it's a great way to learn a new medium. I am learning so much about watercolor and gouache with just doing small little studies of all of these things and learning how the medium behaves, along with how, for the watercolor, for example, it behaves differently on different paper. And then there's all kinds of watercolor paper. So I really have the opportunity to see which papers I like the best, which paints I like the best. Do I like pan paints? Do I like tube paints? You know what I mean? Like, which brushes do I like for certain parts? And it's a lot easier to figure all of that out when you're working on one small piece of a bigger subject, and you know that it's not really going to take you that long, and there's not a whole lot of pressure involved in that, and you can really learn a lot really quickly, I think. I mean, I'm not like this super big professional or anything, so you can take everything I say with a grain of salt, But these are the things that I'm discovering about art studies myself, and I'm also discovering that they are really helping me grow as an artist and really helping me pay attention to the things that I need to be paying attention to. Another really great thing about art studies and why I think they're so important, and obviously this is a new realization because, as I said, this is a new practice that I'm taking into account. And one thing I noticed while I was doing these studies and trying new mediums and doing these nice little, just really quick, I mean, not really quick, sometimes I'll do them for an hour, sometimes I'll do them for a couple hours, but I am noticing that in that period of time, because it's such a small piece of that giant puzzle and you don't have the composition that you spent a whole bunch of time on, and you don't have, you know, all of the whole subject to worry about, is that it's really easy to experiment with studies, and it's so easy to try things that you wouldn't have tried on a bigger piece that you were working on. So I also feel that like it's a great way to learn and try new things and see what you like. And especially with watercolor, like, because this is a smaller chunk of you know, little piece of corner of my sketchbook, and it's just one eyeball, I tried a lot more than I was normally comfortable with, if that made any sense. Because I mean, it's not a big deal, there's no pressure, it's in my sketchbook. You guys really didn't have to see it if I didn't want you to. And to be 100% honest, I actually did another eye study with both eyes, and I did it on the wrong side of a small sheet of paper. It was watercolor paper, but I did it on the wrong side, and for some reason the paint kept granulating. So I just moved on to my sketchbook and decided to try again. And I'm really glad that I did, because this came out so much cooler than the other one, because I was willing to experiment and try those new things. It was actually really quite shocking, because I have a small 5x7 pad of Fabriano Artistico 140 pound hot pressed watercolor paper, and when I pulled it out and I cut it to size and I taped it down, it took me 2 tries to get my drawing right. So obviously I had flipped it over, not thinking that either side would be different. And then the paint started to granulate, and I thought the more that I layered it, the better it would look. And that really wasn't the case with the other side of that paper. But I also, when I was working on that loose sheet of paper on camera like that, I really felt the pressure for some reason. And then as soon as I switched over to my sketchbook, like, suddenly all the pressure was off. You know, I realized it was no big deal and I could just do what I wanted. And I had every intention of topping this off with colored pencil, but because for some reason it was in my sketchbook, I really wanted to go for it because it didn't matter. And I ended up not using colored pencil on top of it, and I was really, really happy with the result. I could not believe it. I was really taking my time, trying out new brushes, and discovered that I really liked using the liner brushes with watercolor for the eyelashes and the small highlights and all of those little tiny details that I wouldn't have paid attention to. I let the layers dry in between. I did some laundry. I got it all done, and I was very happy with the result. So that is why I think art studies are so important. Here is the final little image that I have here. If you are new around here, I make art videos, and my hope is to inspire you to pick up your brush or pencil and create something. So if it's your first time here, please consider subscribing. I make new videos every week, and I have over 100 on my channel right now for you to watch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.